Article 61 of the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda mandates the Electoral Commission to compile, maintain, revise, and update the voters' register. This process ended on Monday, December 23rd, 2019. The reason as to why the update, or one of the main reasons as to why there was an update, was to capture those that were 18 years and above, therefore eligible to vote, to capture them and have them on the voters' register. Was this achieved after the process ended? That forms our discussion on Face the Citizens today. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Iguma Gabriel. To have the discussion with us, we have a panel of distinguished guests, but we also have an auditorium full, especially of young Ugandans. And of course, you at home watching by television, you are a special guest and we hope you'll have a good discussion. On our panel, we have from the Uganda Human Rights Commission, Mr. Byonabye Kamadi. Welcome to Face the Citizens.
It's a pleasure.
Right next to him from Uganda Youth Network, Madam Munira Naluga. Welcome to the show.
Nice to be here, and thank you, Gabriel.
And from Parliament, the Honorable Anne Adeke Ebaju. She is a National Female Youth Member of Parliament. Welcome to Face the Citizens.
Thank you very much, Gabriel. Happy to be here.
And finally, from the Electoral Commission, Mr. Paul Bukenya, his Deputy PRO. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Since this is something that falls squarely within the mandate of the Electoral Commission, let's hear first from you. After the update, how did the process go from the perspective of the Electoral Commission?
Yeah, thank you, Gabriel. We conducted a general update of the National Voters Register as required by law during the period November 21st up to 23rd of December, because initially the program had been scheduled to close on 11th December. We extended the exercise twice to enable eligible persons who had turned up to go through the exercise. So we registered persons who reported to our centers. They registered as first-time registrations as voters. Then we also provided opportunity for persons who wish to transfer their voting locations to apply to do so. That was achieved during that exercise. But the register was also, we would call it a mini display. It was available for registered voters to look at it and confirm that their particulars are correctly captured and they are at locations where they should vote from. So we think as Electoral Commission that particular part of the electoral process was done, it was executed, it was done well. We have now retrieved the returns from that exercise and we are processing them, compiling and going through the data that was captured in the field, and then preparing it for display, which will take place in the month of February, from 19th February up to the 10th of March. So we issued a deadline and we issued a cutoff date, which was the 23rd of December. And we are now processing the register, which we are going to use in elections, which have actually basically started because we have the first elections coming in the month of April. So we are at that stage now, finalizing the register, which we are going to publish, and the detail we are going to publish and declare to the country that as of the date when we close the register, and as after the cleaning process, which is coming from February 19th up to March 10th, the following number of persons are the registered voters in Uganda, whom we will have in the elections of 2020, 2021, which elections effectively start in April and then progress up to the last levels of elections we'll have next year in the month of February. So that's where we are at this moment. Okay,
and when the Electoral Commission did make public the dates when, the update would be happening, there was public outcry about, the period of time. And whereas people called for an extension, many times the Electoral Commission seemed adamant until, the process was done and the calls continued. Couldn't it be done beyond 23rd of December? That is the updating.
By law, we need to do a cutoff date and process a register and then make it available for use in the electoral process. And the electoral process, if you observe, is really on. The political parties need to do their primaries and they need a clean register. They are doing their primaries as early as April. Some are doing as early as April. But of course, We already had a register. We are updating it, giving opportunity to persons who are turned 18 and those who had not registered before. Like we said at the registration when we were starting, the register already had about 17 million voters registered. And the purpose of the Gen Update is to give a window, a last window for those persons who wish to transfer, for example, or those who have turned 18 and need to register to do so. So I think that opportunity was availed to Ugandans. And registration, as you know, is a continuous process. There are persons that have been registering. As you register with NERA and your citizenship is verified, you provide your particulars, including voting location. So we've captured all those persons along the way, including learners who are turned 18, who were registered earlier on. So I think as Electoral Commission, we were not just adamant, we are doing what is in the law. By law, we are supposed to have a register completed within a specific time, so that we process it and then start other electoral processes. Okay. Yeah. That's why we do a cutoff. It's in our law, we issue an instrument by law and say that as at this date, as at 23rd of December, just like we do for census, that as on this night, these were the citizens or the people in Uganda. So we say, as at 23rd of December, these are the persons who have registered as voters. All right. So everyone who turns 18 afterwards, we are not able to take on them.
Okay. Madam Munira, first of all, how did the young people find the process of updating the voters register?
From a perspective of young people, we note that this process was too short for all young people to register, and noting specifically for those that will be turning 18 years after that registration exercise is done, is that they are going to miss out on elections and maybe standing for different positions of power. One is that, yes, we note that there is a deadline for updating the register, but then we note that each day there is a citizen that turns 18 and they will not be able to vote after that exercise is done. So Electoral Commission, we note that the exercise was too short, and a number of young people, that is a turn-up of around 1.3 million, will not be able to vote if Electoral Commission does not provide opportunity after the deadline for them to register. And yes, what is done in other spaces is yes, registration is done. The update register is exercise is done in phases so that 5 months to elections, more young people are given a chance to register for the update. But then if this chance is not availed, young people miss out on such opportunities.
All right. The Uganda Youth Network is, as the name suggests, a network. You bring together young people, you bring together, NGOs that gather young people.
Yes.
As the Youth Network, did you raise this issue, with the powers that be, with the Electoral Commission? Did you send any petitions?
Yes, we did. So in partnership with other civil society organizations, including the Citizen Coalition on Electoral Democracy, we petitioned. We held a press conference and, of course, had this information clear to media and all people right there. So in this press conference, it was very clear that there was need to make information clear to young people so that they register after the deadline, but also to provide space for more young people to register before the deadline, because, as you know, young people constitute almost half of our population, and if they are not given an opportunity to participate in some of these issues, it's a very big challenge to the country. All
right, Mr. Yes. Kamadi, the right to vote is one, of the rights that, citizens above the age of 18 have. And like you've heard, it's been publicized that from the data that we have, it currently indicates that close to 1.3 million people will not be able to vote if we maintain the cutoff that was taken December 23rd. Is this a concern for the Uganda Human Rights Commission?
Well, like you've said, the right to vote is a fundamental human right guaranteed in our Constitution under Article 59. And in order to enjoy that right, there are processes which take place prior, and citizens are enjoined to ensure that they have a duty to register for electoral processes, which the Electoral Commission does. But the complex question is what Mr. Bukenya has just said. There has to be a cutoff point. Yes, every day everybody turns 18, but that if you don't have a cutoff point, it would mean even on the voting day, some people should access the register and vote, which is practically difficult. So in a democracy, what is important is what we agree on as citizens. As long as there has been enough participation, the cutoff point that is being talked about was made known to people in good time. For those who have already turned 18, have had a chance to ensure that they participate in the ongoing processes, then unfortunately, those who have not yet turned 18 may have to wait for the next round of election cycle. Like you know, ever after 5 years, we repeat this exercise, and therefore there will be room for those who had not yet turned 18 by 23rd December to participate. I recall in 1993, during the CA exercise 94, I was 17 something. Actually, I'm a vivid example. And I was following national events very well, but because I had not yet clocked 18, by the time they were working on the register, I was seeing, I was available, but I couldn't vote. But time came, now I'm eligible and I've participated in a number of elections. So,
can't it be argued that at that time it was a lot harder logistically to actually update, get somebody's particulars from whatever area they're in, and then updating the register? It's not as complex these days.
It's not about whether you can send an SMS. You must look at the whole process comprehensively. Because if I have the ability to register online, for instance, that does not give the EC the required time. Assuming that is done by so many people across the country, it will take them steps backwards. What we need to understand when we are talking about the right to vote and rights generally is not all rights are absolute.
Okay.
And if you could allow, and I a little bit explain this, not all rights are absolute. Rights can be limited for purposes of public order, public security, public morality, public health. But the limitations must be demonstrably justifiable in a democratic society. And that is provided for under Article 43 of our Constitution.
All right. I need to bring Honorable Adeke in. One of the Electoral Commission says, well, it was according to the law, we have to have the register ready by a certain date. And we've been calling for electoral reforms. One of them was on, registration processes. How far has Parliament gone with this, especially considering that you've had people's complaints, especially the young people, because they're the ones who will be turning 18?
Well, Gabriel, thank you very much. I'd like to greet the audience because it's a really young audience. And I have so many of my constituents there. Thank you for inviting me here. I sit on the Legal and Parliamentary Affairs Committee, which has been the committee in charge of processing the electoral reforms. You must note that it's not only the electoral reforms that will affect the elections. There's also constitutional amendments that are underway, the Wilfred Niwagaba bill on the constitutional amendment. So it's not only the electoral reforms. The committee it collected views last year and was able to compile the report and report to Parliament. And now what is left is for Parliament to pass the electoral reforms. But Gabriel, I think the challenge that I have with the current status quo of the legal regime governing elections is that we spend the entire cycle after elections without regard or deliberately ignoring the fact that there will be another election. So if in 2016 there was a decision made in election petition number 1 of 2016, which is John Patrick Amama Mbabazi versus YK Museveni and Attorney General, and that decision recommended particular initiatives to be undertaken to amend the electoral laws. Why would it become a matter of concern 3 years later when we're about 1 year shy of the general election? Because then the amendments that we make are not even going to be, they're not going to be felt. We are not going to have time to sensitize the public about those amendments and the repercussions, and yet we are going into another election. So I think that even when the amendments are finally assented to by the head of state or go for third reading and are passed, they are going to do very little in changing or impacting on the quality of elections and the result of elections that we shall have. Needless to say, really, that I'm a member of parliament, I sit in the House, but I think that government deliberately delayed the process of reforming the electoral regime.
All right, is update and the way the update of the voters register part of the amendments that you were handling?
Everything, because you see, you cannot divorce one part of the electoral process from another. Okay. It's a whole comprehensive thing, Gabriel. If we are, because part of the amendments were touching the register, they were touching the polling dates, everything. It's a whole comprehensive system. You cannot sever one from the other.
All right. It's time for us to take a break. When we come back from the break, we will be taking questions from the audience. Stay tuned. Welcome back and thank you for staying with us here on Face the Citizens. I'm your host, Igoma Gabriel. Today we're discussing the update process of the voters registered. Having the discussion with us from Uganda Youth Network, Munira Nalunga, from the Uganda Human Rights Commission, Mr. Kamadi Bionabye, from Parliament, the Honorable Anna Deke, and from the Electoral Commission, Mr. Paul Bukenya. Before we went for the break, each of the panelists had given their position in relation to the update process and how we're moving forward. Would like to find out from the audience, it is time for you to ask your questions, but does any of you have an experience? What was the update process like for you? Were you able to register? Was the time enough? When you put your hand up, just let us know your name, and then you can let us know your experience or your question or comment.
Well, thank you, Gabriel. I'm Agaba Nelson from Chibale East Constituency, Kamwenge District. My question and my kind of experience is going to be directed to a representative from the Electoral Commission. Well, regarding to what was advertised on radio and television in regard to where you have to go and update your register, they used to say, get your polling station. And unfortunately, those machines were never there. So time of when, the registration processes could take place. They would say, get to your polling station, but whenever people used to get there, they would find the personnel from the Electoral Commission not there. And they were only at the sub-county level. Then secondly, timing. Even when, for example, if a sub-county has about 8 villages, they used to give 1 day. And the reporting date, it was quite unfortunate that they used to report at 9 and close at 2 or at 3, which would not be sufficient time to register everyone at the date.
My name is Amanya Gibson from Kigali constituency, Kamwenge District. My question goes straight to the representative from EC. One, the time that was given or presented before the audience was not enough. For instance, I may go drive my point straight. How and when? For instance, most of the students were still at school. And besides that, there are some students from the universities, even high schools. The time which were published for the public was the time when students were in their exams. So they never participated in that.
All right, but they extended up to the 23rd.
Yes, even though they extended, but still, that due process when somebody is from school to home, there's that inconvenience that normally happens in. Even though you may come back home, but without that information of updating.
Right.
Because once you're in a school, there's not enough time for publicity.
Right.
And another issue I may talk about is the diaspora. There are some people who are in the diaspora who were supposed to be registered. I want the representative from EC to give us more clarification about those. Thank you.
Okay, so for me, one of the things that I actually saw was hard for me was transferring from one polling station to another. They kept on asking, can you go to your LC? Now, these LCs, we don't even see them anywhere. So you end up not registering or transferring because you've looked for your LC chairperson from day one up to the last day. They're nowhere to be seen. And the second thing is, I find a problem with civil society organizations. For them to wait 1 year to the election and they start petitioning for some of these things, they make a lot of noise towards the election, but they do not pay attention to these things. Yet they say they have, they check elections. So if you check the election, it is done. Why don't you start from the day the election is done, and then you have to wait for 1 year or months to the election for you to start going and making press conferences? And then lastly, I do not understand whether the EC was nature sensitive when displaying registers, for them to consider people who are deaf, for them to consider people who are blind. Do they have registers that are for the blind people for them to check? Because I don't know whether they were nature sensitive when they're displaying their registers.
All right. Because of that question, I will also be sensitive to the people with disabilities. They're seated at the front. I'll take the gentleman at this extreme end.
Thank you very much. My name is Odeke Alan, a student from Chambogo University. My focus is on EC. The first one, the big challenge is access to information for people with disabilities. For example, the hearing impaired people. They focus more information on hearing people, and these ones who are deaf, they fail to get the information. They don't know where to register from. So EC, how are you going to help us to solve that information of, I think, that challenge of information?
Okay.
Access to information.
All right, let's take
another issue.
Let's take that question. We will get another. Mr. Bukenya, it seems like all the questions are to you, but of course there are elements of, human rights, elements of civic education. We will take those to Mr. Kamadi. So, yes, sir.
Well, thank you. I want to thank the audience for the questions they have raised. And Banagawa from Chivale talked about update venues. The general update of the voters register is actually conducted at the parish. By law, the parish is the basis for registration as a voter. It's not a polling station. The guidelines we issued were very clear. And we sent actually one team per parish. We had update teams at the parish. So over the 32 days that we did this exercise, the teams had to do a rotational program. Like a parish which has 5 villages, they would do 2 days here, then go to another place. But you can register.
So, for example, how would I know where they're going to be today?
Which is why we mobilized the LCs. We worked closely with LCs. You know, LCs are our leaders. One of the challenges we have with young people, and you will agree with me, I do voter education, I do engagement with young people, is that sometimes we do not take effort to know the local leaders until maybe you need a passport. And now even the passport has moved away, you don't. So sometimes we do not know where the LC are, unless maybe when there's been a theft or something. But I think we worked with the local leaders. There were bizindas, these local megaphones going around. And it was a way of mobilizing, besides the digital platforms we're using and the press releases in the papers. But update stations were actually based at the parish. Although they were not fixed at one place, they would move within the villages in the parish. And the reason we extended was to address the numbers that were still in line and, weather conditions and things like that. But we were responsive to that. I think that rotational program helped us to achieve the numbers that we achieved. But like other exercises that we do, someone is always left out somehow for some reason or the other. He talked about convenience. Ugandans want to do things at convenience, which would not be bad, except that now to register as a voter, it's a duty by law, by the Constitution. To register and participate in elections is a duty. So we encourage young people to do it as a duty. Most people were at school. Schools closed at the end of November, which was very good. So we almost had 3 weeks of holiday. And we're also getting into the Christmas holiday mode, people traveling up country and all things like that. So that's why we're very, very able to respond to the need to extend, and it was supposed to address that.
All right.
So, so the little time for students, we think that the time was adequate within the legal requirements. Like we needed a register. The youth are the first category of people who are going to vote. Youth elections, we are starting with special interest group selections. That includes youth, persons with disabilities, workers, older persons, and they need the registers as April. We are producing the youth register right now. So I think that's why we're doing. There's no law for us to register citizens outside our boundaries as Ugandans.
What of the people with disabilities?
To be done.
How exactly are you making your information, the register, available to persons with disabilities?
It's one of the areas that are challenging, especially the visually impaired and the hearing impaired. We're working with our NGOs that work with for persons with disabilities to do. We are doing studies how are the other countries doing it, including braille registers, so that they could do that. We have a special interest group desk, an officer who is attached basically to benchmark, to study all those. And those are some of the things that we need to bring into the legal framework for reform, so that otherwise, as by law, the way the register is prescribed now and the registration process, it still needs to be factored in to include persons with disabilities. But we've done the benchmarking and the case studies to see how to access these services more to persons with disability. Right now, what we're doing is to work with communities that please help, just like you help, because these are members of our families, just like we help them in everyday work, please help them as well in the elections. Yeah.
Mr. Kamadi, it seems like many people are being left out. People with, living with some disabilities, people in the diaspora. And yes, you told us there is a process of how to register, but this process doesn't seem to cater for certain categories.
Well, like the Honorable Member of Parliament has said, what we agree on as a people is what is done. Now, there are some countries, for instance, Kenya, I have seen their diaspora voting, but there should be an enabling legal framework in order for that to happen. There are some countries where prisoners do vote, but you realize in our case here they don't vote. We have not put in place an enabling legal framework to provide for it. Until it is done, unfortunately, it will not happen.
All right, let me get educated here. Does the law say that people within the country that are incarcerated cannot vote?
No.
So why don't they vote? Because they are within the country, they are registered voters. Why can't they vote?
You need to understand human rights comprehensively. The moment one is incarcerated, his or her right to personal liberty is restricted. Personal liberty. You invited me to come here and I was able to come. But if I were in a police cell, I wouldn't have come because of personal liberty. The right to personal liberty guaranteed under Article 23 of the Constitution. But when it comes to all other rights, they are supposed to be enjoyed. But how do you enjoy them is the issue. So there must be the necessary legal framework, the policies, guidelines on how it should be handled. Okay. And once that is missing, there is no way the Electoral Commission will find itself in places of detention. Right. Parliament has to come up and guide that important process.
Parliament.
Yes,
you have to come up.
I agree. The rights of prisoners are really a subject of contention. Not only the right to vote, but even when you come to the female prisoners, every other right that flows, how they deal with their children, how they are going to deal with their spouses during the time when they're in detention. So that is really a very, very touchy subject that would require more time and dedication. But I just wanted to speak to the diaspora voting. It has to be enabled by the law. Right. And we have seen different jurisdictions that have enabled people in the diaspora to vote. Our neighbors in Rwanda enable the people in the diaspora to vote, and they vote one day before the general election. So there's got to be an enabling law that will define who is a Ugandan in the diaspora, where they can vote from, which times they can vote, how they are going to exercise that right. So in the absence of that, really that right is not enjoyed by people in the diaspora.
All right, I'm going to come to you, but I saw you were putting your hand up.
Yes, someone hinted about the civil society timing and how we react to things after a very long time. But just to let you know that the Electoral Commission has a roadmap, and until this roadmap is publicized, we cannot really engage without clear timelines on what is going to be done here and when. The other is around, and I've noted that Electoral Commission, I think, still has some challenges in terms of constraints of reaching out to the people that are supposed to reach out. You note that more people out there are not receiving some of the services of Electoral Commission. One is because there is sensitization, but there is little sensitization. So I don't know if it is a resource constraint or something like that, but we need to maybe as Parliament to advocate for Electoral Commission funds so that they push up and sensitize
Give Electoral Commission more money.
More money, yes. That is if they need more money.
I expected Paul to smile at that one. It's time for us to go for a break. When we come back from the break, we will take a few more questions and the concluding remarks. Stay tuned to Face the Citizens. Welcome back, and thank you for staying with us here on Face the Citizens. I'm your host, Iguma Gabriel. We're having a discussion about elections, particularly the update process, because if you're not on the register, you will not be able to vote. Having that discussion, we have representation from the Electoral Commission, Mr. Paul Bukenya, from the PR office. We have from Parliament, the Honorable Anna Deke. She is a female National Youth Member of Parliament. We have from Uganda Youth Network, Munira Nalunga, and from the Uganda Human Rights Commission, Mr. Kamadi Byonnabye. We have an audience of eager young Ugandans who have been asking their questions, and now we're going to take more questions. But you at home watching us via television, you can continue to have this discussion with us using the social media handles and pages and the hashtag that is appearing at the bottom of your screen so that we can capture your thoughts on what we are discussing. Let's take a few more questions. I will start with the lady in the front. I believe she lives with a visual impairment. So, Madam, just go ahead. You're being handed a microphone.
Miss Naigaga Justin, a student from Chambogo University. Yes, for me, I agree with Mr.
Byonnabye.
That one. Because some people, they lack information when they read up some issues that you people, you can endeavor to go and register your names. Some, they ignore that information. But for me, my issue was like those people with electrical commission, they have some stigma on people with disability. Yet for us, we are willing to endeavor to go for registration. But those people, they need to fight about stigma. Thank you.
I'm Murunji Trase from Chambogo University. Partly, I went for registration, and I met two people with disabilities, visually impaired. They didn't know how to read and write print. So the moment it is their turn to be registered, they would tell them to come next time until the end.
Thank you. I'm Waraka John Victor. To Mr. Bukenya, through NIRA, don't you think you have data and statistics of people who would have turned 18 by 2021? And why couldn't you allow them update their registers or register for voting?
All right.
Then to civil society organizations, you've said that you have to wait for the EC roadmap. But who is supposed to implement these reforms that were put in place before? I think these are reforms that have to be presented to Parliament through a bill. We don't need to wait for EC. And so civil society organizations had to check that even before. raising up a few months. Then lastly, someone is saying that they are benchmarking on issues pertaining people with disability. A few months to voting. Why couldn't they do that some time back?
All right.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I'm Wachemba Rogers from Bale.
Yes, Rogers.
We cannot talk about this whole issue minus involving Parliament. Because Parliament, they are the people who make the laws. Now, my question goes to the right honorable.
Honorable Adadeke.
Honorable Adadeke.
Yes, they've made you right honorable.
Yes, and I was wondering why you were correct.
Now, honorable, I remember in 2017, we rushed with the issue of the Tojukwatako. But now, when it comes to the issue of elections in this country, you have taken long to discuss about our issue. Why?
All right, Rogers, thank you for the question.
This goes to to Parliament. Since Parliament...
Your name, please.
Oh, I'm called Ekelwanga Priska. Since Parliament has the right, to implement the voter, the voters' reforms, and you say there is a delay, I think this has affected sensitization of the public and of the youth, or even the people with disabilities. If there is a delay on anything pertaining the EC's preparations, then there is also a delay in sensitizing the public. Right. That's the reason very many youth are not aware of what they are supposed to do as young people or the people with disabilities. That's why we still demand for more time as young people to participate as young people in the election.
Right. Thank you, Priska. I believe her question was on Parliament's role as, the law-making role and holding government accountable and government entities.
Thank you, Mr. Gabriel. My name is Nungwas Gwakatura. I'm from Makerere University. My question goes to Mr. Kenya from EC. How can we become sure that the EC will prepare free and fair elections in 2021 when the EC was appointed by someone who will participate in those elections?
All right.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Felix Emorot, and I'm from AFLI organization and from Makerere University. Precisely, it's form of a question and a suggestion as well to the PRO of Electoral Commission. Is there a way, or has Electoral Commission come up with a way probably of online voter registration? The world is very digital now. And it would really be easy, because Ugandans, just like one of our panelists said, they usually don't love to be inconvenienced. They love a place of convenience. And so if an online platform can come up for these voter registrations, it would really be amazing.
All right. Yeah. Thank you very much. That's as many questions as we can take because we have to leave time for responses. Mr. Bukenya, you have most questions, so we'll go with you first. But if you could be brief in your answers.
Thank you, Gabriel, and thank you, dear audience. To start with Felix, our laws do not provide for, as they are right now, they do not provide for online registration. You need to present yourself physically. You need to be physically present at a point of registration, and we capture particular details from you, including fingerprints, that require you really to be present, physically present. Even some online processes still require you to present yourself physically. So right now, we do a physical registration. We take your images.
Can we tie that in with NIRA? Because NIRA has our biometrics. They have my fingerprints. And once you have the data, you have my fingerprints as well.
Actually, when you register, you are doing an application, and it goes through a system of verification, which is done by NIRA. So we work with NIRA. And because NIRA is the authority that is charged with verifying that you're a citizen of Uganda, in order to be registered as a voter, you must be verified as a citizen. So your application is taken through a NIRA process. But still, you need to be physically present so that your fingerprints are captured. That can be done online, although some people can do that. But, then you need finger machines at points of registration. But as it is, registration in Uganda, you need to physically present yourself at a registration center. But to also answer his question that why doesn't an EC capture particulars of those who will turn 18 by by 2021.
And you did that with the learners?
Of course, no, not exactly. We still capture you from NIRA database, but we capture you as at the date of registration. You must be 18 as at the date. By law, we cannot do it in anticipation. Actually, that's where the law is. Maybe it needs to be looked at. We cannot register you in anticipation that Paul will be 18 in January 2021. Okay. We register you as at that date. You must be 18. That's the law. Otherwise, you will be taken to court and will be found to be faulting the law. Yeah, data is available, but we capture you when you've turned 18. So when it falls outside a cutoff date, then we're sorry, you cannot be captured as a voter.
There was a question on stigma.
We've included training on serving persons with disability in our manual for our election officials, because like you must admit, it is not everyone knows how to deal with special needs. So we've benchmarked with other electoral authorities. It's expensive to put an officer, a sign reader at every polling station. Right. We have more than 60,000 polling stations, but we are introducing some basic training on handling special needs, persons with disability, elderly, by our election officials. It's a journey, and I think we'll be getting there.
The surprising thing is you're remembering to do this now.
No, we have done it actually over time. We have coded the special interest groups because we organize the elections. And it's one of the special interest groups. We even have a special desk dedicated to that. So It's not just something we've remembered yesterday. We've been progressing. We've worked with Nodipu. We've worked with the agencies and the different NGOs that deal with persons with disabilities as a teamwork. To ensure that this constituency is served well. Yeah.
Mudia?
Yes, so the argument here is that the Electoral Commission needs time to plan, but also to get this register done for preparation of so many things around elections. But you see, we've seen instances where on the very day of voting, election materials are not on ground. So as a legal provision, as we go forward, is we need to use estimates, because we can't wait for absolute figures for us to start planning as a country or as an electoral commission. We can use estimates, and then the electoral voter registrar update can go on as EC plans, and then at least 5 months to elections. Young people that turn 18 can be able to register, but also
so the young people are saying 5 months to elections.
Yeah.
There are even people who are above 18 who did not participate in the update. So it's not only young people, but of course, every day someone turns 18. So the argument on the side of young people is a valid one. But the law cuts us off.
All right. Mr. Kamadi?
Well, looking at the entire aspect of voter registration, electoral reforms, of the view that as a country, we need to go beyond coming up with electoral reforms every time we have an election. I think Parliament should help us and ourselves as a country have some comprehensive debate on what we need to manage our elections. In 2015, I was in Nairobi ahead of the Burundi elections. We are discussing as the East African community. And colleagues there were surprised that in Uganda, even after 5 years, we must have electoral reforms. What is it that requires reforms every now and then? Yes, there could be some emerging issues, but I think by and large, we could legislate for ourselves on how we want certain types of elections to be conducted, so that unless there is something fundamentally wanting, we don't have to always go through. Now, like the Honorable MP has said, it is already chaotic. You know, the timing is short. You don't know exactly, because in 2015, I recall the Ligan Parliamentary Affairs Committee of Parliament. It was being chaired by Honorable Tashobia, now the commissioner in the EC. They had to postpone to say these reforms will be handled comprehensively by the next parliament. Now, the parliament that was meant to handle them comprehensively, its term is almost also ending. And here we are discussing the same thing. So I think, like Honorable Adeke raised it, we need to, now we have no choice but to say the 11th Parliament, it should as much as possible in its first year look at these electoral reforms comprehensively. You know, because I'm afraid now, between now and April, when the interest groups elections are supposed to take place,
right.
What can you do meaningfully?
All right. I have a question. Let's try and squeeze this in from a person with disability. It says, why do people with disabilities, why does the election for people with disabilities, why do you have 5 people selected by the members from each district to participate in that voting? Is this a sign of democracy?
Yeah, these elections build up. They are progressive. Like I told you, for example, in April, we're going to start with the elections of committees at village level. And then they progress. The 9 members progress to the parish. And then from the parish, you progress to the sub-county. And from the sub-county, you progress to the district. And then the district committee sends the delegates to the National Delegates Conference. It is just like that. They progress. So the few people who go up to the regional, conferences or the national conference, because they follow that structure. It's the law. That's how the structure is framed. Otherwise, it would mean us putting a ballot box at each polling station in each village for purposes of elections at that level. But that's the structure. That's how it is structured.
Honorable Adeke?
So I think there were just comments made, which I'm totally in agreement with. And I think that the governance agenda is the bigger picture. It's not about elections. It's about governance in our country. It's that every single reform that has been prioritized in our country is because it favors a certain person's interests. So I think it's really broader than this. You see, elections are just a trigger. But there is something beyond elections, and that's the governance of the country and the interests of the people in these political spaces. So when you ask why we take so long to reform the law, it's just about the governance agenda. It's that the people who are in charge of making these decisions would rather have it that at the 11th hour is when we remember to change the law. So I would like to honestly say it's deliberate.
Okay.
But unfortunately, I'm not here to speak politics because we are strictly speaking about elections.
Yeah,
but it's as it is.
In relation to elections, very quickly, because now we're out of time. The Electoral Commission was seen asking for more money in order for it to run its purposes. Is Parliament going to give that money?
Yes, but let me just say it's very regrettable that on Thursday of last week, the Electoral Commission came, we invited the Minister of Finance, and he even was contemplating borrowing money for the next elections. Wait, Gabriel.
Yes.
Do you know what that
5
means?
years ago, we knew there was going to be an election.
We know that there's going to be an election in 2021. How dare you think you can borrow for something that is foreseeable? It's reasonably foreseeable. You know that the election cycle is coming. How dare you plan the affairs of the country, the finances of the country, and put us into debt for something that you can reasonably foresee? I think there is something fundamentally wrong, and the executive really needs to check it.
We have to end right there because our time is done. But the conversation continues on social media. Have your say on the way your country is being run. From me and our guests, thank you very much for being part of Face the Citizens. Until next time, goodbye and God bless you.